This episode contains material that might be triggering for some. If you need to stop the podcast at any time to take care of yourself, please do so.
If you need support, you can call the 24/7 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me. Hello, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Welcome to Q&A number 20. I don't know
oh my gosh, I just realized this is number 20. Literally when you said it. Wild.
It's exciting. Though also, I will admit, I don't know. I think we just compile these. All right, I shouldn't say we. Michelle compiles these. And I think she does it just in order that they arrive.
I do.
And so they are of varying lengths and difficulties. And I will say, this one's a little hard. So
yeah,
there's a lot of big stuff. Yeah, so I hope we're helpful.
Yes.
So yeah. Oh, and the last thing before we launch into the material is I will say that it is hotter than the hinges of Hades today, and so both Michelle and I have fans going. We have attempted to arrange it in such a way that it's not noisy, but I will admit we haven't tested that. So if there's a slight sense of a breeze blowing through the episode,
that's what's going on.
That's what's going on. Also, I have the window behind me open, so I apologize in advance for the traffic noises. There you go. All right, you're up first.
Are you ready?
Yep, ready.
I get to read the first one. Okay. So this one says, hello, I just recently started listening to your podcast, and as soon as I got your email address, I had to message. I've had serious anxiety, depression, and severe self-confidence issues for a very long time, which has ruined every close, loving relationship with a woman I've ever had. I'd get angry and have these terrible mood swings over the stupidest things. I never got physical with them, but I would say things I knew would hurt them. I've been talking to someone who has PTSD, and they think I have BPD. It has been rocky to say the least, and my self-confidence issues are the main source which lead to anger. Can you please give me some advice to work on my self-confidence so I don't ruin this relationship? I see a therapist and will be starting EMDR soon, as well as DBT group therapy. Brief aside here, EMDR is a form of trauma treatment. I love this woman very much and don't want to lose her. I need to bring my self-confidence up and learn to be more mindful of her feelings so I don't say or do anything to trigger her. Please, I really need your help.
Okie dokie. So, the first thing that I wanted to say, well, yes, is you are not a bad person. I know you're like, Kate, you don't know me. But I'm going on my years of experience as a therapist. I don't suppose this will surprise anybody that a lot of people coming into therapy have self-confidence issues. And I've had a lot of people do their very, very best to convince me of why they're terrible. And no one yet has succeeded. Right? Like, they're just not, no one's out there doing truly terrible things. Like, they're not bad people. People with wounds, people with struggles, people with difficulties, with issues, with whatever, but they're not bad people. And so I just want to start with my abject certainty, listener, that you are not a bad people either. So put that out there. One way you might just tiptoe up to starting to recognize this is you've already said there's this woman that you love, which most of the time translates into thinking pretty well of a person, and she loves you. So what does that say, right? Can you start to see how that might translate? That this person that you love, that you care about, that you respect, that you think well of, that maybe you even look up to, loves you. That's got to say something, right? Mm-hmm. So trying to tune into that as a way to start, recognizing, maybe you're not the terrible thing that you think you are. In that regard, something that might be helpful is to take time each day to record something you're proud of. A lot of people are really uncomfortable with pride, right? It's even, in the Christian paradigm thought of as one of the 7 deadly sins, right? It's got a lot of flack. The idea
of pride as being like vanity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, which is funny because that's its own separate 7 deadly sins. Anyway,
different.
whatever. But but it doesn't have to be big, right? This doesn't have to be like, well, it's not like every day I cure cancer or something like that, right? It can be, I really, really, really didn't want to do the dishes, but I did them anyway because they needed doing. Cool. Good job, you. Be proud of yourself. You did a hard thing, right? So it doesn't have to be anything monumental. It's just acclimating your mind to looking at your day and finding something about which you can be proud. As a corollary to that, try and see if you can find someone to brag to, right? Someone who's not going, you can tell them that this is an exercise, right? You don't have to just launch into it blindly, right? But someone who, you can say, hey, I did this awesome thing. And they can be like, yeah, that was awesome, right? Someone who will welcome your pride, someone who will welcome your joy, someone who will welcome your self-confidence in any way, shape, or form that it can show up. I didn't, for some reason, put this in my notes. I didn't catch it as much when I first read through what you wrote, listener, but you talk about saying that you want to be more mindful of your partner's feelings, so you don't say or do anything to trigger her. Phrasing might be that I'm reading into something that's not there, but you gotta lower your rung a bit. As someone with PTSD, well, more likely CPTSD, but we can't get diagnosed with that technically in our country. I could never hold anybody to the standard of never triggering me, right? Like, you're human beings. You're gonna bump up against each other, and if you're 2 human beings with your own mental health issues, you're definitely gonna bump up against each other and your mental health stuff, right? So I do want to say, don't reach that high. Don't hold yourself to the standard of not doing or saying anything that will trigger her. Rather, work with her to find out what you can do when she's triggered, right? How can you help her recenter, right? What does she find calming? Does she need space or does she need to be held, right? Everybody responds to triggers differently, and everybody has different, unique things that help bring them back from it. So discuss that with her, right? Find ways to recover from the inevitable times when your guys' mental health issues are going to bump up against each other, right? Help her know how she can help soothe you, right? If there's something that starts to trigger your, self-confidence issues, find a way that you can let her know that, and talk when you're in a good time about a way to how she can help bring you back from that precipice, right? You're doing a lot of good stuff to try and work on your issues. You mentioned EMDR, DBT group therapy, having a therapist. This is wonderful. You're already doing a lot. And mental health issues don't go away overnight. So plan for failure. I know that sounds weird, but we're humans. We fail. We fuck up. It happens. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't even make you a bad partner. So it's good to try to avoid triggering your partner, and also recognize that, that it's not reasonable to expect you never will, no matter how hard you work on yourself. So that's something. And then last but not least, because this is technically a DBT podcast, and so I try to have us have almost anything, some DBT skill in each of the answers to things.
As best we can.
As best we can, right? Is to maybe do some check the facts, right? When you're really spiraling, when you find yourself getting into a place of overwhelm, a place where you're maybe making a lot of assumptions, a place where you're catastrophizing in some way or another, check the facts might be a good way to help bring yourself back from that precipice. And, remind yourself that you're not a bad person, and that the facts bear that out. So yeah, those are my thoughts. What about you, Michelle?
Yeah. it's really interesting that you were just talking about the sentence where this listener says, I need to be more mindful of her feelings so I don't say or do anything to trigger her, because I actually had the exact same thought as I was reading through it. You know, we read through all of these, of course, before we get on and actually press record. And as I was reading it out loud, I went, oh, that needs to be addressed right there. Yeah. Because exactly as you put it, I mean, you addressed it really nicely, but it's way too high of a bar to set for ourselves that we will never trigger, especially our significant others. This is inevitable. You can be the most well-meaning person in the world and it's going to happen. So I'm really glad that you addressed that, Kate, because it stood out to me too when I was reading it through the second time out loud.
Yep,
but the thing that stood out to me mostly within this email the first time when I read through it was, I'm trying to find the exact sentence. Where is it? Oh, there it is. It has been rocky to say the least, and my self-confidence issues are the main source which lead to anger. So I love this awareness, listener. This is great awareness to have, because we say this about anger. We've mentioned this on the podcast here and there. Anger, a lot of times, is accompanied by another emotion. We feel anger and we feel something in addition to it. And my sense reading this email is that the other emotion that you might be feeling is shame, right? If you're struggling with self-confidence and believing in yourself, that sounds like shame to me. The good news is you have a therapist you're working with. So, of course, I have no way to know what exactly you're working on in therapy with your therapist. But I would really encourage you to see what it might look like to be digging into some of the roots of those self-confidence issues. Self-confidence issues can, not all the time, but they can and often do run really deep into childhood experiences. So talking through some of that stuff of when did I maybe notice my self-confidence changing? Who maybe built up my self-confidence when I was younger, and who were maybe the people in my life, whether it was peers or parents or whoever, but who were the people that kind of tore my self-confidence down? And really start exploring that deeper in therapy is the biggest thing that I can recommend, because I get the sense that with that struggle, it's a struggle that, again, DBT skills may be helpful here, and it's awesome, again, that you're getting into group therapy. Yes, get into a skills group. Amazing. And also, this is probably something deeper, and there probably is not a quick fix DBT skill, though I like Kate's recommendation of check the facts. I think that's great. I also think that it's going to really take some deep individual work with your therapist to start untangling some of that for you. However, something else that I'll recommend, which doesn't have anything to do with DBT, but is something that both Kate and I are really passionate about and does crop up from time to time on the podcast. We've done closing moments that are kind of really rooted in mindful self-compassion practices, is focusing on self-compassion. I love this idea of self-compassion and phrasing it in that way more than the idea of self-esteem, or more than the idea of self-confidence, is to have compassion with ourselves, because we are all going to struggle at various points in time with various things. It's just going to happen. And the idea behind mindful self-compassion is that we can just love ourselves for exactly who we are in that moment when we're really struggling. We don't have to shame ourselves or tell ourselves how we should be feeling or what we're doing wrong that we need to be doing better to build ourselves back up. We just really get to meet ourselves where we're at. So if you're wanting to dive into some mindful self-compassion practices, the website for that is www.self-compassion.org. And they have a section on there, like one of the tabs on the website says practices. And if you click on that, you'll get some really accessible material that you can start working on. So it kind of builds in pretty nicely to what Kate was saying of like thinking of something every day that you're proud of or something that you did do well that day. You could also try to incorporate some kind of mindful self-compassion practice into your day or into your week, or whatever that might look like, because that may also be very healing for the self-confidence that you find yourself struggling with. So, yeah, that's what I got.
Like it.
Okay,
Also,
ready for the next one? Yeah.
Yes, Jin, our resident mascot, is prowling about the room, so, and probably wants out again, because the truth of the matter is he wants lunch, which I don't provide, but I'm near where lunch comes from, and so he thinks that howling and bothering me might accomplish it. So, anyway,
Gotcha.
The long and the short is, if I have to get up and open the door and let him out, I apologize.
Fair enough.
Because it turns out, no matter how much we want to work from home or podcast, Cat's gonna be cats.
Yep, he lives there too.
So, anyway, next one reads, Hi, Michelle and Kate. I am writing to ask you for some help. I've been listening to your podcast and finding it both helpful and pretty thought-provoking. I'm a 60-year-old woman who struggled with a restrictive eating disorder for as long as I can remember. The severity has fluctuated and I have never received treatment or been hospitalized. I helped take care of my mom during her fight with cancer until her death 4 years ago, and without paying much attention to it, my weight became dangerously low. By the grace of the universe, I ended up working with a skilled nutritionist about 1.5 years ago. For the first time in my life, I have begun to try to really sort out my relationship with food and my body. The good news is that I'm eating, but I have a long way to go. As I listen to your podcast, I am working hard to apply the skills directly and concretely to my day-to-day experiences as I struggle with this enormous challenge. I would love to find a podcast or a book that applies DBT skills specifically to restrictive eating disorders. I think it would help me to have some examples or models that might expand my thinking and help me recognize more of the patterns and embedded ways of thinking that have had me stuck for so long. Do you have any suggestions? Any thoughts you have about this would be appreciated.
Yeah, great. So it feels like an important disclaimer to say for both Kate and I, in our practices as therapists, neither of us specialize in eating disorders. It's not an area that either of us have a whole lot of experience with treating. And so when this email came in from this listener, does he want to go out, Kate?
Could you hear the meow?
I thought I heard something. Yeah.
Yes, I will let him out. Sorry. I was just making a face because he walked right up underneath the table and yelled at me.
Yeah, now's a great time while I'm responding. So neither of us really specialize in eating disorder stuff. So when we got this email from the listener, I was like, okay, let me just look up and see, like, what workbooks there might be, because there's so many different DBT workbooks. Maybe there is one specifically for anorexia or food restriction. And nope. There is basically a whole lot of nothing when it comes to looking at how DBT treats anorexia and food restriction. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of a bummer. I don't want to tell this listener, sorry, you're out of luck, but essentially DBT may not be actually the treatment of choice for food restriction. And then fast forward, because we got this email quite a while ago, we are backed up on Q&As. But fast forward a little bit and I started taking a training. I'm still right in the middle of it and still just kind of getting my feet wet. But I started doing a training for RO-DBT. And the RO stands for radically open. The DBT still stands for dialectical behavior therapy. And RO-DBT does treat anorexia and restrictive eating disorders. And that's actually a big area of study that they've done on for what different mental health diagnoses does RO-DBT work. And anorexia is definitely one of them. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time today going into what RO-DBT is or anything like that, because we'd be here a little while if I was trying to explain it from scratch. But RO-DBT is becoming more and more common in treatment centers for eating disorders. So even though, listener, you say that you've never received treatment, and maybe you're at a point in your life now where you don't feel like you really would need specific eating disorder treatment, either on an inpatient or outpatient basis. For others who are listening who may be in the midst of a restrictive eating disorder and you're looking for resources or treatment modalities that could help, RO-DBT is where you want to go. So not traditional DBT, like Kate and I talk about in this podcast, but radically open DBT. And basically, RODBT has a whole other different set of skills, has a whole other different focus set than what regular DBT has. Like, regular DBT here has the 4 different modules of mindfulness, emotion regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness. RODBT has completely different modules, but that's really the treatment. So you can start looking up resources for RODBT, and that is where you want to go instead of the DBT skills as we typically think of them. I mean, I think some of that might still be helpful, but RODBT is going to be far more helpful when it comes to restrictive eating disorder and looking for help in that regard. So start searching on that stuff. See if there's a group near you. Again, it's not as popular as DBT. It's not as well known. It hasn't been around as long. But if you can find an RODBT group near you or an RODBT therapist, that's where you want to head.
I need to do some more research on that as well, or look at the training you're taking, because the more you talk about it, the more curious I get. But I don't have a lot to add to that. I did take a little bit of a gander, and it does look like there are lots of eating disorder recovery podcasts to choose from. I have not listened to any personally, so I haven't vetted any. I don't want to make any direct recommendations because I don't know. But the good news is there appear to be a lot out there to choose from. So if that's something that you think would be beneficial, hit the Googles, and many will fall out. The only other thing that I wanted to add is skill-wise, I don't know. I know I beat this drum a lot, but I would go right towards mindfulness. Right? Just being present, maybe wise mind specifically. Because, wise mind choices can really help combat either direction, right? I think that if you were to drastically and horrifyingly oversimplify it, from what I understand Michelle to be saying, you might think of DBT as do some things less, and radical open DBT as do some things more.
Yes.
But the nice thing about wise mind is it probably has a decent idea of whether you need to be doing whatever the thing is, less or more. Right? So checking in with your wise mind, spending some time in mindfulness, I think that's a door that can open both ways, right? That's something that can help no matter which direction you're struggling. So that's all I would have to add to that, really.
Great. Yeah, and I will just tack on real quickly before we go to the next one, kind of the general idea behind the key difference between DBT and RODBT is kind of like what Kate was just saying. So DBT was really designed for people who struggle, we could say, with impulse control, right? Struggle with self-harm. There's tons of DBT stuff out there for bulimia and binge eating and all of that. So DBT is also really great for addiction and substance abuse and basically anything where it's kind of like, I have this urge for this behavior that maybe is not healthy or doesn't serve me. A lot of what the DBT skills are designed to do is to kind of help you figure out how to have better, I don't really even like to use the word control, but like better awareness around like, what are my urges? What are my impulses? What are my problem behaviors? And what can I do instead? And RODBT actually focuses on people who struggle with being maybe almost too over-controlled, which is why it works so well to treat anorexia and restrictive eating disorders, is because it takes a lot of control in an unhealthy manner to restrict our food intake to an extreme degree. And there can be other mental health diagnoses where you struggle with over control, like OCD is one, because you're very controlled in whatever compulsive behavior you might be engaging in, kind of a thing. So when you're struggling with like almost restricting yourself too much with anything and you need almost less self-control, that's where RODBT comes in. So yeah, they really kind of deal with two different sides of the coin. So, yeah. Okay, so the third one we're going to read says, Help! I'm starting to spin out. I'm usually pretty good about being, quote unquote, in control by pouring myself into work and into maintaining the 4 romantic relationships I have been in for the last year. But I recently met someone new who wants monogamy. So I did the only thing a person with BPD could do and ended the other relationships so I could have a chance at monogamous love. Also, I'm in the middle of a seasonal layoff. I have nothing to do but think. Think about who I recently cut out, what I, quote unquote, should be doing with my time and energy, the recreational drugs I have in my cabinet, the hookup apps I deleted, and the list goes on. I put on a playlist to distract myself and I'm going to smoke some weed, but I still wanted to reach out. It seemed like a positive thing.
I think you're right. It is a positive thing. Thank you for reaching out. Just wanted to start with that. Also, as someone who has practiced polyamory for a considerable portion of her life and who has now been in a, I don't know, I would say technically polyamorous but functionally monogamous relationship now for the past 8 years, I do want to acknowledge that it can be really hard to balance out societal norms and our own desires, right? So I am not trying to say, listener, that the only reason one might want monogamy is because society tells us to. Monogamy is a fine choice. It's a lovely thing. It's not a bad idea. And I can also understand if societal pressures might be part of why you feel like ditching the 4 other people for a chance at monogamous love is the right decision, because that's sure as shit the message we get, right? So whatever the various pressures, I guess I would say, coming from internal or external, I guess, factors, I just want to acknowledge that it can be really hard to balance those things out, and even to sort them out, right? Even to sort out what our own real desires are versus, you know, these other external pressures or ideas. So I don't think there's a wrong choice. I don't think, choosing monogamy or choosing polyamory, I don't think either way would be wrong. And I understand that choosing either one, there can be a bit of a, well, maybe the grass was greener over yonder, and is this what I really want? And, right? So, I guess starting off, I just wanted to give a giant dose of validation, because that stuff is hard and complicated. So it makes sense that there's a whole lot of, well, as you put it, spinning, right, in your brain about this. In regards to actually trying to help you be a little bit less spinny, I would, my first place I tend to go is self-soothing, right? It sounds like there's a lot that, I don't know, the more worked up your brain is, often the more worked up your body is as well. They're pretty closely tied together. So sometimes just doing slower, softer, gentler, kinder things for/with our bodies can help to slow down and soothe and quiet, and I don't think I can make kind into a verb. To kind our brains? No, doesn't work, does it? So, self-soothing might be a thing there. And then, also, you might try and check the facts, or do a check the facts worksheet. Do the skill? Use the skill. My brain is broken today. Because, especially when we start just sort of, going round and round and round and round and round and round in our own brains, we can veer pretty far away from the actual facts of a thing. And so sometimes I think check the facts can be really grounding. I know that Michelle and I talk about this when we actually teach the skill, and so I'm sure we talked about it in the episode about it. Some people can think of check the facts as only a way to show that they're wrong in their thinking. I don't want to try and put this out there as that for you, listener. It might be very validating, right? It might show you that the stuff that you're thinking, whatever, makes sense. But either way, it's grounding, right? Whether it's affirming or not. It's still really grounding, and I think that can be something that can help with the spinning, is to be a little bit more grounded. So, what about you, Michelle?
Yeah, awesome. I guess to kind of start with some of the things that I hear this listener doing well. Like, one of the things that I wrote down as a skill that might be helpful here is accepts. I think accepts will be really helpful in those moments when, like you say, I have nothing to do but think. And as Kate was just saying, you know, again, when your mind is just on repeat and going in a loop, go to accepts. Effectively distract yourself, and listening to music can really help. You know, that's totally in line with the A, especially depending on how you were listening to it. It might be in line with the S if you're listening to it really loudly or that kind of a thing. So I hear that you're already using some of the stuff from accepts, and that is definitely going to be a helpful skill here. I think kind of also broadening it out is, I really, for some reason, the first skill that I thought of when I read this was coming back to wise mind. I think what can happen sometimes in life is that when we are under a tremendous amount of stress and change and transition, our wise mind gets harder and harder and harder to find, because we're just under like a really big mental load. And you're under a really big mental load here. Like, you just had a huge transition happen within your relationships. You're going through being laid off and not being in your normal routine of going to work, whatever that routine looks like for you. I mean, that's a lot of change. And so it's going to be harder to access your wise mind when you're adjusting to all of those changes that are occurring in your life. But I think what's really important is to figure out some kind of way to be extra aware of the wise mind choices that you are making. It was a wise mind choice to reach out to the Facebook group and to make this post. That was a wise mind choice. So, like, they're there. I feel pretty confident that your wise mind choices are there. And again, sometimes our brains can very much lure us into the things that are easy, the things that are accessible, the things that are familiar, which you kind of talk about there, right? Thinking about, you know, oh, I have these drugs I could use, or I have these apps that I could be using, right? Our brains want to go to the instant gratification things, and wise mind is going to more look at kind of what serves our highest good. It might be a little harder to get to, but I feel confident that you're making wise mind choices, big or small, at some point during your day. And so I really want you to acknowledge those for yourself, and to just be able to notice that amongst all this change you're going through, like, wise mind is still there, even if it might feel quieter or harder to get to. It is still there. And when you're accessing your wise mind, the other thing that I'll say that might be something to start looking towards is finding some good, pleasant events that you enjoy. Especially while you're laid off, pleasant events are going to be your friend. To do those things that you don't have time to get to maybe when you are working. So, I mean, one could argue that it's kind of like trying to look on the bright side. I don't necessarily want to use that phrasing, but finding something that you can do with your time that you can look forward to on these days where you're laid off, and not having to go into work, say, an 8-hour shift. What else would you rather do? And, you know, DBT has a super long list that you can look at and pick from and say, which of these things do I want to do today that I think I would enjoy? And that may be helpful as well.
I like it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Last one, Kate.
Ooh, last one. Okay. This one says, "Hi, everyone. Almost a year ago, I had a prompting event with my husband, and I had a breakdown where I couldn't sleep for weeks, and I had a complete collapse in anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts. It was so bad. I'm in my 3rd month of DBT group, and so far it's going well. I'm definitely doing much better, not having terrible anxiety every day or being unable to sleep, also no longer having suicidal thoughts, which I know is great. I'm so thankful for the improvement, but lately I just feel a complete inability to feel anything. Every second just feels enormous, and all tasks just feel so difficult. I'm using opposite action, and I accomplish everything I need to accomplish, go to work, go outside, work out, eat. But I just feel so exhausted and like nothing matters. I know I'm not going to give up. I know life has so much to offer. It's just kind of scary because I don't know when life will feel good again. I'm told I need to stop hoping to get back to my old self and just radically accept where I am now. It's just hard because I don't feel happy anymore. Any ideas?"
Oh, yeah. The first thing that came to mind for me when I read this email was that this is often what early recovery feels like. And when I say recovery, I mean recovery. This is what it can look like recovering from substance abuse and being sober. This is also what it can look like when you're in recovery mental health wise, right? Which society doesn't talk about as much. But this is why there are specifically treatment centers for mental health. And especially, I don't know if you, maybe this was mentioned here, maybe it wasn't, I don't know, right? Like if you were hospitalized or did some inpatient treatment or what exactly that breakdown looked like for you. But you're recovering from that breakdown. And this is a lot of times what it looks and feels like. And what I mean by that is that one of the biggest things that I think is talked about in the recovery world is kind of this idea of getting back to the basics. So getting back to the basics where it's like, make sure you're eating 3 square meals a day. Make sure you're moving your body for 30 minutes a day. Make sure you're having like a waking up time and a going to bed time. And let's just really get back to kind of the basics of life to construct a routine for yourself. Because probably when that breakdown was happening, again, whether it's a mental health breakdown or, substance abuse or whatever it is, there was probably a complete lack of routine and things were probably pretty chaotic and overwhelming. So it's trying to rebuild that, which is important and healthy and good. And also, I hear you when you're kind of like, I'm doing everything I need to do and that's about the start and end of it. And it kind of feels like life has lost its color because you're just building kind of the base. Hopefully, as you continue on, you'll be able to find opportunities or be able to see what it might look like to start adding back in some of those things that really give your life a lot of color and really make it enjoyable. But that's not typically what happens in early recovery. You're starting with the really basic building blocks, and sometimes it feels very mundane and boring and awful. It can feel that way. Every day can feel the same, and it can kind of be easy to get into this way of thinking of like, what is apathy. The point? Yeah, totally. Lots of apathy. Yeah. Yep. So I would encourage you, right? Because you say in this email, I just don't know when life will feel good again. Now, good is a very vague term. So I would encourage you to get very clear and very curious about what good means and looks like for you. What do you imagine when you think about what feeling good is? And again, that's going to look different for everybody. What it might look like for Kate of like, hey, what does feeling good look like for you? What feeling good might look like for me? They could be very different. So I don't know what it looks like for you, listener, but get really specific of what feeling good means, what you're imagining when you say that. And so with that, right, you're doing a great job of practicing please. You are getting your please skills down pat right now. And again, a lot of times in early recovery, that's what it's all about. Yeah. Is please. And we don't look any further than please until you've got that down. And Lord knows that doing please on any kind of regular basis takes a lot of work. I don't do all my please skills on a regular basis. Hell no. I do my best, but they wax and they wane. So getting please down is great, and you've got that. And so where you might start to look ahead, though I would really encourage you, you're in a DBT group, which is great. I don't know if you're working with an individual therapist or have other sources of support in your life, because I would really be working closely with them. We don't want you to go too fast and unfortunately wind up like kind of spiraling out again and having things get really overwhelming and really hard. It's okay to go slow, but it might be a good idea to start looking ahead to adding in, I would say some of the stuff from the ABC skill. So looking into what does it look like for you to start accumulating positive emotions, as DBT puts it. Either long-term, what are your values? What are some goals you can create so that you're living out those values and being your most authentic self and have some things on the horizon that you can look ahead to? What are some pleasant events you can start making sure you're incorporating back in? What's some stuff that makes you feel like you're building mastery, makes you feel capable, like you're growing? That's the skill that I would be looking towards next in your healing here. But I also just really want to normalize that how you're feeling is completely so common. Doesn't necessarily make it any better, but getting a feel for, once again, like what good is going to look like in your life now is kind of the next thing to turn towards, is what that means, and maybe some of the principles from ABC might really help you there with getting clear on that. So, yeah.
All right, I like it. Which I think I've said every time. I need to find a new thing to say. I do like it, but new phrasing, Kate. I have a lot I want to say. Let's see. So, to start with, just a little book recommendation. I'm still in the middle of it, so I can't tell you the whole thing, but there is a book called Wintering by Catherine May. And I think it speaks really beautifully to the unexpected benefits of the worst times in our life. Like what we can actually reap from those low, slow, dark, like almost hibernation-y kind of times that we go through. And so it might be something that you would be interested in checking out. I think of it as kind of and this might sound a little, I don't know, hokey, bear with me, right? But this idea of like stagnation before rebirth, or hibernation before rebirth, right? Any kind of real breakdown is exhausting. Like it wrecks you, right? It leaves you wrung out and empty in a way, right? And so it may be that to an extent this time where nothing feels like much of anything, you're kind of, I like Michelle talked about it as a foundation. I think of it as maybe sort of recharging, right? You're gathering yourself, right? It's going to take time. You went into this so depleted, right? There you go. That's what I think. Not more than exhausting. Breakdowns deplete you. And it takes time to build that back up again. Yeah. It takes time to refill the batteries, right? It takes time to get to a place where you can, sort of be rebirthed, right? Resurrected, whatever image works well for you. So that's one part of my thought. Another image that came to me, despite the fact that I can't see anything in my brain. Analogy. There we go. Right, it's this idea that the harder you try and grab sand, the faster it falls out of your hand, right? Careful that you're not grasping too hard to try and grab the good, if that makes sense.
Get happy right now.
Exactly, right? The harder you chase it, the harder it may seem like it's running. Right? I don't know when, how do you put it? You said when life will feel good again. I don't know when life will feel good again for you either, but I do know that stressing yourself out by chasing it isn't going to make it happen faster and may make it happen slower. So, couple of actual exercises that I would recommend. One, and actually, honestly, anybody listening to this, I don't know what you're going through. I recommend doing this. It's just good, I think, in my opinion. Is at the end of every day, take a moment and just think, what was my favorite moment today? What was the best moment? Couple of things here. Best doesn't have to be good. It doesn't. We think of that, favorite, best, right? We tend to assume that has to rise above the neutral line.
Yeah, that must feel positive. There might not be anything to feel positive.
Least bad is still most good, right? And so it's a thing that's accessible even if everything is shit. What was the least shit? Right? What was the least bad? What was the moment you felt the least terrible? this does a few different things. A, and possibly the most important, is that if you do this like every night for a while, your brain will know that it's coming. And it will mean that throughout the day, you're going to be looking for that favorite moment. It shifts your focus, shifts your attention. I don't want to say to the positive or to the good, but at least, again, to the least bad, right? So you're aware of those moments much more strongly than you might be without this practice, right? Your brain will be like, ooh, maybe this is it, right? Maybe this is the moment I'm going to say is my favorite moment tonight. And it's surprising how helpful that can be. That your brain is just going through your day looking for the thing that's going to be its favorite. Also, if it does end up winding up as an actual good thing, our brains tend to record stuff by how it ends. So ending our day thinking about the most positive aspects of our day actually helps that day to get recorded in our brains as a good day. It's weird. Human brains are weird. So, also, if you have a partner that's willing to do this with, it can be a fun partner exercise. You can do it with kids. You can do it with a friend that you text message. You don't have to, but A, it's nice to have the accountability sometimes, and B, it can be fun just to share with another person. This was my favorite moment. What was yours? And then the other thing that I would recommend, just because there's this one sentence that says, where is it? I just feel a complete inability to feel anything. Again, this may sound a little contrary to normal advice. Notice the unpleasant things. In the next sentence you go on to talk about feeling exhausted, feeling like nothing matters, feeling like everything is enormous, things are difficult. Those aren't pleasant, but they are feelings. Yeah. You are feeling things. It's there. Don't necessarily wallow in them, but notice that you are still a feeling human. Right? You have an entire experience that includes your feelings. They just may not be the ones you'd rather be there, which is understandable. So that's and then I guess, actually one last thing. You talk about, not wanting, need to stop hoping to get back to my old self. I agree, radical acceptance, being where you are, all of that is wonderful, and it can help to remember, maybe never as bad as the last one that you mentioned, but you've had ups and you've had downs. You have had times where you felt good, and you have had times where you felt bad. And focus makes a big difference on this. This is a little bit close to is the glass half full or half empty. It's true that if you're feeling good, you can pretty much guarantee that at some point that will end and you will feel bad again. Yep. Because that's what humans do. But on the other side of it is if you're feeling like shit, it will end. And you're going to feel good again. I don't know when. I don't know how long that's going to take. But it's going to be there. And part of the way you can remember that, part of the way you can sort of hold on to that, is to remember that that's been the case in the past. Right? If there's a past you that you remember an old self, right, that was happier, more cheerful, more alive feeling, obviously you are capable of that state. Yep. Right? This is a thing that can exist. And so remember that you have felt good before. You felt good and you felt bad and you felt good and you felt bad and you felt good and you felt bad. Mm-hmm. And they all last their own amounts of time and they're all of their own intensities. But the wheel will turn again. And you'll find your joy. So I guess those are my thoughts.
Good note to end on.
Thanks.
Yeah. So if any of you listening have questions that you want us to answer in an upcoming Q&A, you can email them to us at dbtmepodcast@gmail.com. Also, post things in the Facebook group. Today I think it was a 50-50 split between emails and Facebook groups. So we pull from both places to make sure we're answering everyone's questions that they have. So, you can reach out to us there too.
Awesome. All right. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT